You are listening to All In, a podcast dedicated to helping you fulfill the mission of God in your life and around the world. I'm your host, Jeff Roper. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of All In. So glad that you've taken time to be with us. The Bible says in the book of Proverbs, chapter 16, verse 9, says, "The heart of a man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps." Every one of us start out on a journey thinking, man, God's going to do this, God's going to do that. And, it's kind of how God hooks us into what he's got planned for us. And what I've learned is God never gives me the fine details, because if I would have known the details, I would have backed out of it. Well, this week, we're going to explore some of that. If you've been following this podcast since we've gotten started, you'll know Jonny and Sarah Griffiths. They've been our guinea pig on what does it mean to go to the mission field. On episode 35, episode 36, episode 52, and episode 76, we talked with them along the way about the various processes of which they went from being pastors and being happy in the Pacific Northwest, pastoring a church, and then all of a sudden God interrupting them or intersecting their life with a call to go to Great Britain and help us develop and plant a church and help continue developing church planting movements among the British people. And so this week I've asked Jonny and Sarah to come back on the podcast and have a conversation about what they have learned in this process. Jonny and Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, man. It's great to be back.
I'm glad I'm bringing joy to you already. Jonny and Sarah, tell me, tell us, for those who haven't listened to the previous episodes, give us a little snapshot. Give us a summation of your guys' journey from where you were at when we had that conversation years ago to where you are now.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Britain, met Sarah here when she was doing some youth work, and then moved to Idaho 2004, got connected in with Foursquare as a movement, and actually started pastoring the church in Nampa, Idaho as the lead pastor in 2012, and just really happy, really settled, really a sense of mission and calling, make disciples, send people out, just trying to pursue all that I could see in scripture. We were enjoying ministry and life together, having kids together and getting a house and just all of that rooted stuff. And then I met you. And Jeff, you were the instigator of God's interruption. You plus some co-instigators, I suppose.
Conspirators.
Yeah, conspirators. I think that might be the right word. But just introduced an idea to us of is God calling us back to the land I was born in. Which led ultimately to us resigning from our position at the church in Idaho, and Jan 1 of 2016 just went in the deep end with building a partnership team and fundraising and living on the road with our 3 boys and trying to homeschool them on the road whilst fundraising, and realized that was a bad idea. And just all of that stuff to what was it, 9-10 months later, we got on a plane.
Like longer.
It did. It felt like
eternity.
It felt like purgatory, Like, what did I do wrong? I'm just stuck here in the middle, in the long, long middle. And then October of 2016, we got on a plane with our 3 sons and flew back into Great Britain. And that was kind of got us to that point. Sarah, what happened next?
Well, we moved to Cheltenham. We felt like it was strategically a good start for us as far as the size, and that with our focus being mostly on white British folks. Not that we don't like anyone else, but we felt like they are some of the hardest to reach people in this country. Cheltenham just kind of fit what we were looking for, and our imagination was that we'd spend a good 6 months really getting to know this town and the people in it, and then we would begin planting like a church planting movement with lots of smaller congregations meeting in homes, and it'd be this grow into this network thing.
Yeah, it's great when we say it out loud. It's like, oh, we were really ambitious, idealistic, naive, impatient, young in our thinking. But I mean, we really had faith for seeing things move quickly, because I mean, the deployment, even though it felt like forever, actually for the amount of support needed to live as a larger family overseas in Europe, like it went really fast.
Yeah.
God's favor and faithfulness was evident, and then suddenly the brakes were on, and I think it maybe took us a while to realize that.
Yeah. And we were told by a mentor of ours that well, there's kind of a year zero. It's like, this is your kind of getting to know the land and that kind of thing. And we were told that about a year after we'd been here. So we're like, okay, great, year zero. Now here goes year one, right? And then since then we've been told, well, so year zero isn't necessarily actually a year. It can be far longer.
But they don't tell you that in the small print of it, because you probably would never go. If someone said to you, here, I want to invite you into something, give up everything, everything that seems fruitful, the good stuff of making disciples, and I want you to go and enter into utter obscurity and basically feel like you've achieved nothing for an indeterminate length of time. How about it? Oh, and by the way, you're going to have to raise your own support team to go out there and do it. Like, nobody would go for that, right? And yet, except for God. God goes for it, right? And I had this thought. I was thinking about our conversation. I had this thought earlier. Like, one of the things I've really learned reflecting on the journey is that God is significantly more committed to his mission than I may be at any given moment, and significantly not committed to my time frame for his mission. Like he's going to get it done at the speed that he knows it should happen, and part of that is at the speed that he's working in me.
Right.
Like, there's things that have to shift in me to right. Oh, we laugh. But just
Sarah, that seemed to really resonate with you.
Yeah. Anyway,
No, I've just been mulling on that, and in many ways, like, there's been so much that had to be surrendered to take on the calling, the modes of ministry, the things that we actually enjoyed doing, whether it was the preaching, or whether meeting in regular small groups of people who already know Jesus, or the worshiping community and playing in the band and all of that stuff that's great, but makes no sense in the mission field when you're pioneering. Right. Like, it just doesn't connect with hearts and minds of people who are far from Jesus. And so you have to stop doing all the things that you actually enjoy doing in serving Jesus and take on a radically different posture.
What did you discover about yourself, about your assignment in this period? I don't know how long that year zero was for you, and obviously God's calendar is not the same as ours. I remember, in Revelation 22, Jesus says, "Hey, I'm coming quickly."
Right.
And it's been 2,000 years. His definition of quick and my definition of quick obviously are not the same. What have you experienced? What are some of the things that you've had to go through and process through in this whole season?
I don't even know where. I think it's going to be way too long for your podcast. I think what's coming to my mind right now, based on what we've just been talking about, is that nobody could tell us how long, certain sections of this journey or seasons of this journey could be. I think that, we've had some people say, yeah, I knew this part was going to be longer than you thought, but I didn't say anything because you didn't need that then. And I think realizing how others who have gone before, have experience in this kind of thing, have just allowed us to have our own journey. That has been really helpful for me, to allow others to have their own journeys, those who we're ministering to even if there's things that I can see and I know, for them to experience and discover these things themselves is really important. And even though I might be able to see, or I have, whatever small amount of like, yeah, I knew that was going to happen, or I know that this is where you need to go and how you need to do it. They need to have their own journey, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Sarah, what did you discover about yourself through this process? You were taken out of a beautiful setting. I mean, I've been in your home back in the States, and I mean, it was ideal. I remember sitting around in your backyard with you guys, and it's like, man, you guys lived in your own park, as it were. And, you went from that to, you had a dream. You came, you were willing to give up everything and go, and you got there, and it did not unfold as quickly or as in the ways that you thought. What did you discover about yourself and your relationship with the Lord through that whole process?
That I really believed that I trusted him, but it was not as much as I thought. And I think that's probably a journey I'm still on.
Okay.
I thought I didn't care about things very much. That isn't necessarily true. I've learned that I'm far less patient than I thought. This all sounds really negative, but I think what I am discovering about Jesus is that he is really patient, that he cares about me, not just what I can do.
Good.
And those are things that I would have said before. I think just going through these experiences, it's just like, it's deeper. It's just grown, the understanding of those things, and I suspect there's just more growing and more depth to go.
Yeah. How about you, Jonny?
The word surrender has been precious and terrifying, and in the opening stages of leaving and of entering into this, this new calling and new expression in our lives of being missionaries, there was a lot of external surrender. Gave up that house, gave up the community of faith that we were a part of. I mean, we know we'll spend eternity with those people, and we'll gather and worship with them forever and ever, but not this Sunday. Gave up the awesome pizza joint downtown, gave up the pecan rolls at the flying. Like there's a lot of external surrender.
Right.
Sold so much of our stuff or gave it away. And then you move and you think, right, I've given up. I've given up all this stuff for you, Jesus, right? And then he says, hey, let's have a look inside. And the process of surrender moves from external to internal. And I think this is kind of the journey in the contemplative tradition. And it's been an area for me of great growth and change in my prayer life, my how I spend time with God, and learning the stillness, the silence, the solitude practices that have allowed me to hear and to see as the Spirit has shown, like, hey, that you didn't think your identity was tied to your job. Guess again. Let's look at that. You didn't think that you had fear, but look, there is fear here, and you don't need to be afraid. And it's been tender, it's been loving, but it's a scary thing. And so that for me, it's like you do the surrender up front to go, but there's a deeper surrender that needs to happen,
right?
That prepares you. And just like you were saying, Sarah, like that sense of what I have received in the grace and mercy of God, I can now extend to those around me and give them what they really need. So I think that's ongoing.
Yeah.
But it has gone somewhere. It's not just deeply frustrated. There's growth.
Yeah. And I think that's the journey that every missionary I've worked with goes through. And it's the stripping away of the externals of our own identity, because we really don't know ourselves, and we don't know God. We know ourselves, and we know God in context to our situation, and we can get very comfortable in that. And then when we're ripped out of all of those things that we did not realize were giving us security, and we're standing there naked before God, and he says, okay, now let's have a conversation.
Right.
And you're trying to hide yourself and cover yourself and run from God. And that's been the journey that you guys have been on. And I think it's a beautiful journey, something to be embraced. And so kudos to you guys. I think you're doing awesome in that. What have you learned about God in this whole process?
Man, he's the least anxious person in all of Kingdom Come. And we've had moments where we feel like, there's great momentum building with this small group or this particular ministry expression or this outreach, and like we're now gearing up, like, okay, how do we grow that and multiply it? And then it just something happens, and you realize it was all really fragile, and that can cause real turmoil.
Yeah. And
then the Lord's just like, I'm not anxious about this. And every time, I think every time, maybe I'm being overly optimistic. It feels like every time we've been disheartened and ready to quit something, and then all of a sudden, but God did this. And he just pulls these things together in such a way that it's like, through the tenderizing process of failure, as we've perceived it,
right,
it's made us vulnerable, which has made us vulnerability, weakness. Like, Paul's not kidding, right?
Right.
Paul's not kidding. It's true. And it's in our moments of profound weakness and need and brokenness and disappointment even, God does something that you go, what was that? So from a missional community seeming to just kind of fall apart to how within a week of thinking, let's just be done with that way of trying to do things. We've got a group exploring the big picture story of God that includes a good amount of young adults who don't know Jesus, and they want to be here every week. Or the kids ministry thing that we tried to quit and tried to leave, and multiple times, and then all of a sudden, in weakness, in not having all the flash of it, like was Sarah and the vicar from the Anglican Church are running this thing every other week, and it's like 20% of the kids in the school choose to turn up on a lunchtime. It's like 40 to 45 kids come and hear about Jesus.
Wow.
And so, like, God is just not anxious. He's okay with things not going the way I want them to.
What about you, Sarah? What have you learned about God in your journey?
There's just a lot, but the thing that comes to mind that I've been kind of contemplating a bit more lately is that God really does work through weakness, and that Jesus really does understand the things that we go through. And I mean, specifically what I am thinking about is so we have had another child since we've been on the field.
Yes, you've been fruitful and multiplied.
We've grown the church.
The Genesis book of church growth is still operational.
But while I was pregnant, I had a condition where I was really, really unwell. And I fully recognize that my suffering in relation to others is nothing compared to some people, but it's what I experienced. So what I can draw on. But there was a long season where I was so unwell. I honestly can't remember a lot of that season while I was pregnant. It was just trying to survive, trying to keep a little bit of water down or something.
Right.
And at the same time, it was during that season that God really used us and me to really minister to some people. And we had like a weekly meeting with a friend of ours where we were taking her through the story of the Bible, and I would sit there just thinking, don't throw up, don't throw up, don't throw up. And just trying to
if people only knew the thoughts we have.
My face was probably gray, but the Lord used us at that time. He used me, and it, I would just be like, God, just help me. Let this be for something. And I suspect there's more to it even than I know, but
that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. As you're telling me your stories, I'm thinking back on a number of people as well that I've known that have gone through similar journeys like this. One acquaintance of mine had pastored a large, thriving church, and it was 2,500 to 3,000 people. Was an overseer of multiple churches, from where he was from, and he heard the call, and he came here to Europe. And church to this day hasn't gotten over 75 or not even 75 people probably at this point. And that really does start stripping away some of those false points of identity
Right.
that we have, that can we feel accepted, embraced, and loved by our Father, regardless of the external things that we think we've done for him? That we all, and I think that's the beautiful part of this journey that you end up going through. You realize that your worth and your value to God has nothing to do with your performance for God.
Right.
And you guys have kind of gone through that as well, right?
Oh yeah. And once in a while people will ask about our sending agency, and I always get to brag on Foursquare missions, and on you, because we've not experienced a numbers pressure, like prove it that you're getting the job done and that you're worthy of being sent or whatever. It's always been about health as a follower of Jesus, calling. Are you being faithful to your calling? And that's been great. And so to not experience it organizationally is great. But man, there's just mornings where you think, I'd love to see like one person I talk with just care to have a conversation about Jesus. Like, and so you feel that kind of performance mentality thing sometimes in yourself. And yeah, Jesus is really interested in killing that.
Yeah. I mean, there's such a tension between not trying to perform or to make things happen or whatever, and only God can do that, right? The Father draws people to him. Only God can do that. At the same time, us doing everything that we can to position ourselves to know that the answers, know the questions that people are asking, be able to enunciate answers for them, be able to be prepared to disciple people. There's that tension, right?
Right. But I'm just listening there, like having a little lights on moment for myself as I'm hearing you say those things, Sarah. The performance mentality, that kind of striving to show results. You're essentially trying to win people to Jesus so that you feel good about yourself, so that you can prove something about yourself. And so, yeah, we give ourselves for the purpose of the call of Christ, of sharing the gospel, of serving, of loving, of being there to care for the weak and the broken, and all of that stuff. But it's as that really that purifying of the heart happens.
Right.
You become truly other-centered. You're not self-concerned. So my service is to another person for their well-being and for God's glory. And I'm just not concerned about me because I know I'm already loved.
Right.
And it's that revelation in you that, well, actually, there's a bit of you that still thinks God likes you because you did some stuff for him.
Right.
And that hinders you, and I think it taints your ministry. I think people know at some level when your interest is purely for them, or when there's a mixed motive there, and that mixed motive, I think, causes people to hang back.
I think people can sense when they are part of your personal validation project. That, hey, I've got to prove I'm worth something here. I'm worth supporting. I am worthy to be a missionary. I'm worthy to be a minister of the gospel because, hey, you're my project, and make me feel, validate my calling. And that is, when you think about it and you talk about it out loud, you realize just how sick and perverted it actually is. That is the fundamental issue of using people for yourself, and how God is just continually, in all of us, peeling that onion and going, oh, well, hey, now that wasn't an expression of love there. That was an expression of self-validation or trying to do something for yourself, not pouring out your life, giving your life in service and love to the other. And you guys have been on this incredible journey. And just to be able to watch how you've been processing through this has been a joy, knowing that it's joy to me. It's probably pain and suffering and anguish and gloom and despair for you guys.
We've made you share in some of that as well along the way.
And it's been my deepest joy, actually. And it probably is it helpful when you're talking to other missionaries and different people who've gone to, and they'd say, yeah, that's normal. Has that been helpful for you?
Yes and no. Because
unpack that.
Honestly, I'd love to be an exception to the rule.
Oh, you want to be the person that's like, wow, yeah, that sounds really difficult. Would you tell me more about that? Because quite frankly, this has been easy for me. That's
I'm supposed to be that person.
Hey, that's honest. That's so honest. And it does feel it's unique to all of us because it's our journey. And I think it is also reassuring to know that this is part of the journey, that we all go through this. And whether we go onto the field or, we stay in our home country, ultimately, I think God's journey is the peeling away of the external self in order to really know God, to come into that personal relationship with him. Jonny, like you were talking about the contemplative traditions that both you and I pursuing and have pursued over the years. It's phenomenal to know, you come before the Lord and it's like, Lord, just lay this out before you. I'm not here to perform for you. I'm not here to try to impress, but I want to know you. I want to know you. And to be, in the colloquial phrase, naked and unashamed before the Lord, that he sees every aspect of us. And yet he still loves us and embraces us. Warts, wrinkles, jelly rolls, and everything else.
Right.
Yeah. I've, in every podcast, I asked the guest if we had a time machine and we could go back to your 25-year-old self, what advice would you give? Well, I'm going to do, for the first time ever on the podcast, I'm going to twist it just a little bit. Rather than going back to your 25-year-old self, because I've already asked you this before on the podcast, but I want to go back to your 5 years from, 5 years from today, when you first started on this aspect of your journey. Well, actually, it was further back when when you first stiff-armed me and told me to shut up and not talk to you about this again. That was
That's how you heard that?
Yeah.
That's how you heard it? My triple layer no might have that effect. So, okay.
Yeah. It was, you did stick your arm up and say, stop talking to me about this. I'm very happy with where I'm at. And it could have been, it was 6:00 a.m. meeting that day that we were at, or 7 a.m. or something that Kai Martin had ungodly called some kind of a meeting. And anyway, and you stiff-armed me. That was probably 6-7 years ago. But if we went back to that, when you said, yes, we're going, and you started the process, if you could go back to that person, what advice would you give?
Hold your plans more humbly and hold on to Jesus more firmly and be kind to each other on the way.
That's good.
That's off the top of my head. I mean,
that's good. That's what I want. It's off the top of your head and from the bottom of your heart. Sarah, what about you?
I wish that I would have thought more carefully about what to say yes to and what to say no to. but I mean, that's hard because a lot of learning has happened.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, I think that both of us initially said yes to a lot of things that weren't the best things just because our schedule was open.
Mm-hmm.
At just like helping in the community or helping at the school or that kind of thing.
And good things.
Good things.
Right.
But maybe not the best things. And because there's this sense of like, well, I don't have anything else at that time because we don't have anything going on yet. I think wisdom would have said no more.
Okay, good. That's very good. If people want to, actually, before I get into the connect with you guys, one question I'd like to explore real quickly with you is, during this whole process and you're feeling all the stuff you're feeling, was there also added pressure on you had to justify yourself to your supporters? Did it feel like you needed to validate, hey, it's worth supporting us because we're doing X, Y, and Z?
Not from anyone.
Right.
No.
But did you feel it internally? I'm talking about internally for yourself.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. We had conversations, didn't we, of just saying, look, as we're assessing, I think it's important to assess and honestly just get in front of the Lord and say, do you still want us doing this?
Mm-hmm.
Make no assumptions about it. Because in the long year zero, you just start to think, gosh, could people's giving bear more fruit for the kingdom if it went to someone else?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you just have that conversation with yourself, with Jesus. And it's like a testing of like, do I really sense still that calling to be here?
Right.
I kind of think everybody probably really thinks about that.
I mean, let me add, even though there is kind of that felt internal pressure, I think I can really say that we have not inflated anything, or maybe we've been a little too, like, sometimes it's been like, okay, it's time to write a newsletter. Can we just talk about the like good things instead of how we feel like we're failing or whatever?
How are we going to put a positive spin on this?
Yeah, we have tried to be really honest about the journey, and thankfully the Lord has used that in some ways as well. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And I think you guys have done a great job on being transparent without being, I don't even know what the word is, where some people just, it's like, okay, you don't need to be showing that part, or you don't need to be reveling in this so much, but you have always kept your heart open. And that's one of the things that I so love and respect about both of you guys, is that you're not afraid to let people know, you're the people that you're close with and that, you rely on. You don't keep up a facade. I think that's the best way to describe it. You don't try to give pretense and give off airs to say, hey, everything's great with us. No, you guys have been healthy in that, and I really appreciate it. Hey, if people want to reach out and connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
If they hit allinGriffs, GRIFFS.com, that'll hit the Foursquare page, or facebook.com/allinGriffs. We'll get you connected with us on Facebook as well.
Wonderful, because I'd love for them to actually see what you're doing. Because even in the interview, we've talked about the journey, the internal journey. But you guys actually, I don't want anybody to get the impression that you're not doing anything. You guys are doing a great job, but mostly it's about you. It's about the journey. It's about the process of which God is continually transforming people. And I want our listeners to know that wherever they're at in their journey, and I think most of us probably feel like we're in a continual year zero, I've been at this for a long time, and I still think when I grow up, I really want to be like X, Y, or Z.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
thank God I'm
Jeff,
not the only one.
Jeff, just one other thought. I don't know if this, is of interest to anybody, but I mean, if anything of the story that God's, doing through us is of interest. This year, we're working with Creative Impact Ministries, who've done films for a few other Foursquare missionaries and
Right.
lots of other missionaries. We're making a documentary with them this year. So pray for us. The team's actually traveling next week to begin work, and that movie should be ready in probably about 9 months or so. It'll be out.
Wonderful. Very good.
Likely. So I mean, we're just praying that story will encourage other people as well as connect their hearts to the work. So that would be a really, really good way for people to get a sense of what God is doing out here.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Look forward to seeing that. They do a great job telling missionary stories as a documentary. And so pray that God uses that in a tremendous way. Well, Jonny and Sarah, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a joy. So appreciate you guys and love you and respect you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks,
it's
Jeff.
mutual.
Hey, before we go, I want to remind you that you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. Also, I'd like to encourage you to share this episode on social media or through email. Get your friends and family involved if you think it'll help them. And finally, if you benefit from this podcast and or you believe in our ministry of making disciples of nations by developing healthy Foursquare church planting movements, would you consider partnering with us in prayer and even financial support? Go to my website, jeffroper.com, and you'll see the link there that says support our work. We would appreciate it. It helps make this ministry possible. God bless you guys. It's your life. Now go live it.